Next question is, if we flip a coin, then roll a die, how could we write a sample space for that? Pause before I move my arm. Now, to do that, the answer is fairly straightforward. If we flip a coin, we're going to get heads or tails. If we roll a die, we're going to get a 1 through 6. When I say a die without specifying, I'm talking about a 6-sided die rather than an 8, 12, or 20-sided die. Okay? Now, sample space for flipping a coin and rolling a die could be heads 1. In other words, we get heads on the flip and 1 on the die. Of course, then we could get heads and 2, heads and 3, heads 4, heads 5, heads 6. Or we could get tails on the coin and 1 through 6 on the die. And we could write that, of course, as a tree diagram. We could do heads or tails, and then on each of those we have 1 through 6. And if we had 2 coins and a die, what would the sample space be? Well, you won't understand what this means until I write it out or explain it. But, okay, first flip could be a heads or tail. Okay, the second flip could be either a heads or a tail, so that we could append this entire sample space for flipping 1 coin and rolling a die onto the heads here, and get part of the sample space for flipping 2 coins, and we could append this onto the tails here to get the complete sample space. Now, I don't have room to do all of that, and I'm going to do it off camera so you don't have to waste time watching me do it, and you ought to write it out yourself. What happens if we append this onto just the heads here and then on to just the tails here, and how does that represent what can happen if we flip 2 coins and roll a die? So I'm going to pause the video for a second, but I'll be right back with an expanded picture. Okay, so I've taken this and I've appended it onto the heads here to get part of my tree diagram. And I can also, so what I have, just same as I have here, I have heads, tails, there's my heads, tails. I have 1 through 6 on heads, 1 through 6 on the tails. I'd have to then append the same thing down here. And I'll go ahead and do that. If you haven't done it, you should. And here it is, or at least most of it. I didn't have room to get it all down here, but you should understand what's going to happen. Again, I just append the heads or tails and then the 1 through 6 on each of those to get the possible outcomes for flipping 2 coins and rolling a die. And now I've actually written out what the outcomes would be. To get to this point, you have to go heads, heads, 1. This point here corresponds to heads, heads, 2. The path to this point is heads, tails, 1, labeled here. Path to this point is heads, tails, 2, as I've labeled it here. And down here we have tails, heads, 1, tails, heads, 1, tails, heads, 2, tails, heads, 2. Down here we got tails, tails, 1, tails, tails, 2, and it's pretty clear how each of these would be extended.